This is the Juliette interviews, and I'm here with Dan Pickart.
How you doing, Juliette?
I'm really well, thank you. So you're a commercial agent with Industry and Partners.
Correct.
And you are a font of information, and I always call you to discuss many things. And of course,
thank you.
The most important thing that we're talking about. Oh, there's your phone.
There's my phone.
It's your wife. The most important thing that we've been talking about is Measure ULA, and there's really not a lot of information out there. But the most recent thing is I was at a dinner last night with a bunch of lawyers, actually, and
Sounds fun.
It wasn't bad. It was a good dinner. And we were talking about the Taxpayer Protection Act.
Yes.
And how this might reverse Measure ULA, which, as you know, is the biggest tax hike on property owners. It's between 5 and 10 million, it's 4%.
It's egregious.
And above 10 million, it's 5.5.
Yeah.
So explain to me what the Taxpayer Protection Act is.
So before we go there, I think we need to go back to 2017 to where this tax loophole was started. I mean, I think it's really important for everyone to understand that, you know, the gold standard in California property tax increases were done, you know, with Prop 13 back in the 70s, and that's been, which requires any property tax increase or special interest property tax increase to be put on a ballot by an elected official and require 2/3 vote approval. And what happened in 2017 is really interesting. In a small Southern California city called Upland, California, their city council proposed a $75,000 tax increase on cannabis shops, which was above and beyond their any type of normal business tax. And the cannabis industry fought this act and the special interest tax, and the city of Upland won in the Supreme Court of California.
Wow.
So what that did is that started a loophole and a standard for other municipalities and cities to put special interest property taxes on the ballot, not by an elected official and not requiring 2/3 vote, to basically, you know, for their special interests. ULA is an affordable housing homeless interest, right? So that created the loophole 2017. Fast forward, San Francisco, Culver City put these property taxes in place as they saw this loophole evolve. And of course, we all know in this last election, 2022, you know, Los Angeles passed ULA, which is, as you mentioned, a very, very large tax increase on property transfers. So quickly after, of course, there's, you know, a lot of real estate that's worth more than $5 million in the city of LA. And so owners of large real estate have come together, and they're putting forth basically the Taxpayer Protection Act, which is to close the loophole. It's called the Upland tax loophole. So that's gaining a lot of momentum right now. There's a lot of big corporations behind that have obviously a lot to lose if ULA stands. And so what that's going to do is basically close the loophole on the Upland tax and revert back to Prop 13.
So in reality, when I was researching this after it got voted in, and I even asked my son, who's 21, what did you vote for or against Measure ULA? Bear in mind, he lives in a house worth more than $5 million that he will be inheriting, and he's very left-wing. And he said, "Oh, I don't know." And I said, "Well, it was against homelessness, because that is how it was presented. And of course, who isn't going to vote against homelessness?" Then when I was researching, I listened to some podcasts of people actually reading the measure. They couldn't even read it properly because it was so complicatedly worded.
Yes.
And some people are nerdy and goody two-shoes, and they will read and do their research in advance of voting, and some people will just wing it.
Yeah.
And I would say probably more than 50% of the people wing it, and I think that's one of the reasons. And I think the other thing, similarly to Brexit probably, was that people didn't really understand what it really meant.
Right.
When you see 5 to 10 million, you think, oh, those people are rich, they can afford it.
Sure.
But the reality is it actually goes way far and beyond to include, multiple homes, apartment buildings,
everything. It didn't stop.
Commercial.
It didn't stop at a single family residence, and they phrased it mansion tax, right?
Exactly.
And the other thing that's very popular in LA that was brought to light is, the ballot harvesting, right? You're going into, large communities and you're collecting ballots, and your people don't know what they're voting for. They're given, a free meal and a party, or, some giveaways for their kids, and hey, fill out this ballot. Here's how you want to vote, and they vote that way. And so, not even reading the measures. They're just harvesting ballots, right?
Now, who's behind that?
So it's a perfectly legal thing. So the different candidates in different groups will ballot harvest. So, I can't speak on like everybody and who's doing it, but it's a very popular tactic in the political world.
Yeah.
And it's it's bad because you're getting people voting not knowing what they're voting on.
Yeah.
And so, to your point, like, yes, this encompassed every type of real estate except for affordable housing. And to mention the other thing, LA right now has over $1 billion surplus in funds directly allocated towards homelessness that they can't figure out how to spend.
Yeah.
So what is another $1 billion going to do except, create more problems in our political environment within the city to actually get these people off the street and get services for them, right? And so, to touch on your point about how this just doesn't affect the person living in a $10 million home in LA, it affects everybody. And I think if we start from a base case scenario of like a piece of land, right, or even an apartment building. So if I'm going to purchase an apartment building, or investor is going to purchase an apartment building, and the seller has to pay, or the buyer has to pay a higher price because this tax is going to be factored in, well, what is that going to do? That's going to increase the amount of return that buyer needs in order for him to buy the building. And if that happens, where is that going to come from? It's going to come from the tenants.
Of course.
So the rents are going to increase. And what a worse way to combat homelessness with disincentivizing builders to build product. And currently in LA, I'll just mention that the apartment vacancy is 1.2%. So what do we need to increase?
Is that high or low in your opinion?
That's extremely low.
Right.
So compared to like office vacancy right now is at like 30%. So, which is very high. And the industrial vacancies, in LA County is like at 1.9%. So again, very low. So back to, how this affects everyone is you're going to have these developers, builders, investors not be incentivized to build new product because they're going to have to pay an increased tax. The rents aren't going to be there to justify, and taking into account right now you have inflation and extremely high interest rates to also figure out. So it definitely affects just the apartment renter it'll ultimately increase the rental value of that unit, which will hurt the renter. The other thing that's really interesting is most commercial real estate deals are not done by one company. And even if it is one company, that company has investors, and whether it's institutional investors like endowments or life insurance companies, or individual investors. And when a development gets done, you'll have a promote partner, which is basically the guy doing all the work, and then you have the passive partner, which is the guy who's putting in all the money. And so you have right now a moment in time where you have developments that are halfway built or three-quarters of the way built, and the ULA tax on, let's say, a $100 million project could be all the profit that gets sucked out of the project for the guy who did all the work, just because that's how deals are structured.
Right.
And that extra, because it's not on profit. They didn't structure ULA on if you make more than $5 million.
Yeah, no. It's and that's the other question is it going to affect foreclosures, short sales, etc.? These are people who already have more or less lost their equity, can't afford their mortgage, and now they're going to owe the government another $400,000.
That's right.
Or however much it's going to be.
Yeah. So on foreclosures, they'll get it back, and the bank or the lender will take it back, and there won't be any transfer tax on that. But they will have to factor that in when they sell the asset. Right. The bank will. But on short sales and distressed properties, that it's 100% going to affect it, and it's going to take, a real estate value and just, hurt it even further. And so, it's going to be, I think it's ultimately disincentivizing the market across the board for people to transact unless they really have to. And we're going to see a flurry of activity between now and April 1st.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, that's the agents that I've spoken to, who do a lot of high-end properties are like, we are prepping all our estates now. People are very annoyed, and they're going to sell in the first 3 months of the year. But what's interesting to me is, having talked to some lawyers who are real estate lawyers who are annoyed about this and are going to challenge it. Maybe those people should wait, because maybe this could be reversed. I mean, it's too vague to just continue, in my opinion. There's going to be so many challenges, in my opinion. I may be wrong.
No, I think you're 100% right.
So it's got to be reorganized in a way that makes sense. And then once it's really broken down, I think there's just going to be so many people who are going to say, why should we give $400,000 or however much it is? Could be more, could be less. I'm just using that number. Why should we give that to the government when we've lost money? Right,
exactly. So if you have a project that, completely you overspent, I had a multifamily listing this past year that they did a great job, amazing product, but they completely overspent, and they ended up taking like probably $1.5 million, $2 million loss on the project. But the project sold for $10 million. So if you fast forward to next year, now they're going to lose even more money. And again, it was multifamily, 15 vacant units in Santa Monica, and that product should be on the market to house people, to create more vacancy in our housing system in LA. And so I think there's going to be a flurry of activity. There's going to be a lot of challenges. I think there could even be people who do end up paying that ULA tax, end up, after it gets reversed, suing the city of LA.
That's exactly what I see happening. I think it's created so many problems, and it's going to create more problems.
100%. And I think in the meantime, some people may do different structures of deals, right? There's always been long-term ground leases that have been popular throughout the years. We may see more of those start to happen so that people don't have to pay.
Right.
And the other thing I think that the underlying tone of it that I've heard from a few clients is that it's another straw on the camel's back for California.
I know.
And they're just so fed up with it. And they may live here and they may be, large funds and real estate development groups and REITs that do work everywhere else in the country in different markets. And they may choose just to allocate more funds outside of California now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's really sad for California, honestly.
Yeah.
I know it is supposed to be helpful, but it just isn't.
It's not.
And if you look at the people, I mean, it's a very transitory people coming in trying to make it here. There's almost no the inventory of rentals that people can afford who are nurses or waiters or actors who are waiters, writers
Right.
who work at Starbucks or whatever. I think it's really, really hard to find those now.
Yeah. And LA wasn't that for the majority of its existence, right? And it's been the last kind of 15 years where we've seen this real run up in rental values. You used to be able to, find a quote unquote cheap apartment in the city, and wages compared to rent were pretty good.
Yeah, especially compared to New York. I moved here from New York, and I was like,
Yeah.
I'm on the cheap coast.
Yes, exactly.
It's cheap here.
Yeah.
Um,
And the weather's better.
yeah, exactly. So commercially, how is the market currently?
It's I would say it's fragmented. So obviously interest rates play a huge role in commercial real estate. The office market is getting in real time kind of I don't know what the right word I'm trying to say here. I mean, it's getting destroyed, but it's finding its footing. A lot of companies are giving up the majority of their space. They're not using it.
Yeah.
So the office market, and if you look at any of the, publicly traded REITs, they are trading at historic highs as far as their cap rates and their yields, but their stock prices are way, way down. And office, there's groups that would like to buy deals, but there's no debt, and so the credit market is just completely frozen for office product. And we see instances right now where people have borrowed 2-3 years ago at 4% on a bridge loan, which means that they're taking kind of short-term money to fix or rehab a building, an office building, and their time is up to refinance, and they're getting quotes at 10-11%.
Yeah.
Because no one wants to touch it. And so office is in kind of a free fall at the moment. There are some bright spots like the specialty office, the social clubs, the co-working aspects, the studios are doing very well, still have a lot of demand.
You mean what, like Warner Brothers?
Yep, sound stages.
Sound stages, yeah.
So all that specialty items, they still need to
Yeah.
be on site. They need to produce, they need content, and the technology in the sound stages is really, I'm not a specialty on it, but it's really something interesting. There's large backlit LED screens that you can set any scene in the world behind you for talent, and they don't have to bring a whole production to, Australia or China or London to capture that same scene. They just digitally put it on in high definition behind you.
There are some places that you can go to where they have lawns, and it looks like you're lying on a... Wait a minute.
Here, we're right here.
So it's interesting because if you think of society, the pandemic has made us more and more okay with being on our own.
Yep.
And addicted to our phones. We aren't going in to work. I'm just thinking of my own company. I I've been into my office to pick up things 3 times in the last year.
Yeah.
So why are we still having those offices? It's really interesting. What's going to happen to that office space, in your opinion?
So I think there's a lot of different things that I think can happen with that office space. I think first, office needs to really find its footing. And I think there's certain, if you look at the tech industry and you look at how it became such a juggernaut in our economy, 20 years ago, if you got a job in the tech industry, it was like 100% you were working 24/7, you were grinding, you were in the office,
Oh,
you
yeah,
were
that's
like,
true.
you were like, or else you wouldn't take the job. It was
Yeah.
almost like, finance in New York. Like, if you want to start, your financial career in New York, like, you have to grind.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened with tech. And it couldn't be the more opposite today of a tech employee. They're privileged. They don't want to go into the office. They want, their dog, their like furniture, office budget. They want their childcare nearby. Like, they want every little thing, for them, spoon fed, and they don't want to do the work.
Yeah.
And so they're, in my opinion, they're being less productive, and the stock prices are reflecting that, and they're getting, their earnings are reflecting that, and the creativity and the drive from the younger generation kind of building these large tech companies to what they are today is being lost, right, in this work from home. And so I think there's a because it's easier, it's better, right? I mean, if you can stay in your pajamas and get paid your couple $100,000 or whatever as a starting tech employee, like, and you can be on a Zoom while you're walking your dog down Main Street or wherever you are, like,
Yeah.
it's great. But that's not really like moving the needle for these companies. And so I think there's going to be like a settlement of the office space. Some companies are going to require, like, it'll be hybrid, and that there'll be some happy medium, but the younger employees are going to have to get back to the office because they're going to have to train, and they're going to have to do that grind to really build these companies back up. And I think that there's also going to be some aspects, like, different industries are just going to not need the office, right?
Yeah.
Like,
So what happens to that office space?
so that office space that's left, I think, will either get converted into something interesting.
A disco? A day disco,
Yeah,
perhaps?
exactly, totally.
Why not?
Social club,
Yeah.
spas,
Yeah.
all the popular things right now. Or, it could get converted into like residential. So you could see like office buildings truly be more mixed use,
Yeah.
where someone says, hey, look, traditionally the bottom third of the building is the hardest and toughest to lease. Why don't we just take that third and make that third residential and keep the top 2/3 office, where we can get higher rents and, still have some good occupancy. I think some office, like old kind of Class C office, will get converted back to residential, or will go to multifamily. So I think as cities should be looking at, instead of ULA, they should be focused on, hey, let's take this office zoning and let's convert that to residential,
Yeah.
where we need that housing.
Especially when you think about how expensive central LA is.
Yeah.
In a lot of these new buildings, they are building in affordable housing where there's a list.
Yep.
It's very hard to get on that list. They really look at who's going to be renting it, but they're very nice apartments, and they're all new, and they're in buildings with billionaires.
Yeah, exactly. I know. It's quite the discrepancy on some of them, for sure. I also think too, there's going to be like a hoteling of office space where people will just, like Neuhaus. Like,
Yeah.
Neuhaus just opened up in Venice.
Yes. Have you been? I'm a member. I haven't been yet.
Oh, it's awesome. Yeah, I was
Is
there.
it awesome?
Yeah, I was there yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
And it's incredible. They did a beautiful job on their build out, and you go in there, and it's interesting. It kind of feels like you go off the busy streets of Venice and the beach, and you step inside, and it's just all quiet and serene and beautiful, and everyone's working politely and quietly, and has their desk or their seat or their conference room or their phone booth, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it has other things. It does have a club aspect to it, doesn't it? It has a couple of restaurants and.
Yep, it does. It has a rooftop restaurant, which is really nice, and then they have a lot of programming around that. So there's definitely a social club aspect to it.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
So yes, I'm interested in what the next year is going to bring us.
Mm-hmm.
In theory, interest rates are going to go down.
Potentially.
You think? Some people say in the 4s.
I don't know. It's tough to say. I mean, I think inflation is showing we've kind of shown that it's peaked, hopefully, and supply chain things are sorted out. The crazy build up in demand is, slowly, like just coming down, which is great to see. I'm hopeful that, the interest rates will be in the 4s. I am not convinced yet. I think the Fed's going to keep it there for a long time.
Really?
Yeah. They're pretty hawk. I mean, from what I've read, they just seem very hawkish and very bullish on making sure that they don't lower it too early, because then inflation could pop back up quickly. So, I love in a market where there's disruption, because that disruption brings opportunity. And we needed, in my opinion, a cycle that's been going on for over 10 years of
going
growth.
up.
It's too much.
In an insane way.
Yeah. And you always need kind of that, the tides come in so much that we've got to let the tide go back out, and to find those gems and find those things and to figure out what the next step is. And yeah.
I mean, depending on what happens with Measure ULA, I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with real estate agents, because I think the ones that are going to be really making money are going to be the ones who specialize under 5 million.
Yeah, that's true.
That's the bread and butter of many, even the big agents. But what I think has already happened is these big agents have a lot of listings that are not selling.
Yeah.
So they are putting a lot of money into marketing. They have to outmarket everybody else. And for me as a real estate agent, it's interesting. It's why I'm back doing my podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also writing articles, blogs, papers, and things like that, because I think you really actually have to know what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah, you do. And
which is why you're my friend, Dan, because you're so smart.
I'm
the smartest guy in commercial.
Well, thank you. I know it's a big compliment. I think, you're going to see flurries of activity in different price points. But I think ultimately, like right now, where I think there's opportunity, and is where people have had, if they borrowed a typical loan for commercial real estate is either 3, 5, 7, or 10 years. And so if you take those of what's coming due now because of the interest rate environment and the lending environment that we're in, anything that was done 3 years ago, you're like 2019, that
was pre-massive pandemic spike.
Yeah. And so they probably are okay there, and they probably have either sold or refinanced in the last, maybe 12 months.
Yeah.
Right. I think where the folks that you could see a lot of distress in are guys who've borrowed against real estate 5 years ago and like 7 years ago.
But
I think
the rates would have been in the twos, no?
they would have been very low. They would probably would have been between 3
Oh,
and
and so
4%.
yeah, and in other words, they now
Their
really
loans,
they can't afford their
yep,
homes.
their loans are coming due on their commercial real estate, and the lender, their option is either going to be one of three things: to, pay the loan down substantially, if they can afford the higher interest rates. But most commercial real estate lending is done on what's called a debt service coverage ratio, and which means your rents have to be high enough above and beyond your mortgage payment.
Right.
And if they're not, then you're not going to be able to even refinance.
Yeah.
Because so they could be caught in this weird spot where they have a leased building that's paying them cash flow, that they can't increase their rent because they're under a lease.
And they can't get rid of them because they have leases.
They have leases.
Yeah.
And but they can't refinance.
So what happens with those people? They sell.
So they're going to look to sell.
Yeah.
Or they'll have to pay down the debt substantially. So they'll have to take on like another partner. They'll have to fork out more cash. Or if the property is not worth what the loan is, then that's where you're going to see some forced sales or foreclosures.
Yeah.
So to me, that's where I think there's going to be some opportunity. The office world, I think there's going to be opportunity. Retail's done very well in the post-pandemic world.
Has it?
Yeah.
I thought it did really horribly.
So like
but it's come back.
Neighborhood commercial retail has done very, very, very well. So the restaurants are full.
Yeah, they are.
The coffee shops are doing great.
Right.
Anything, even shopping in these, even street retail in LA has been very, very strong.
Yeah.
So
have you been to the new Paloma?
I have not.
It's really good.
Is it good?
Yeah, so it's a restaurant in Venice. Really good.
I'll have to check it out.
They've taken actually the car park area that probably only could put 10 cars. They've built this platform and they've made it a beautiful outdoor. So that's sort of interesting. Yeah, they made it a beautiful.
Is there like 30 people on laptops like Zad Zing?
No.
Okay.
No, I think it'll be a great place for the summer. I think it's a good summer place.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's what I think part of the problem is now, and I've said this before, is that we're now in more seasonal real estate. It is December.
Yep.
People keep saying to me, why don't you just enjoy your life, Juliette?
Yeah.
I'm like, because I have to make money. What I'm doing right now is prepping for the beginning of the year, I've got a lot of people interested in selling.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and one of the girls I work with was saying, we don't have any new buyers, which is interesting. And I think the reality is people are on pause right now.
That's right.
And are they going to come back? Because some people, like I have one client who's like, just wait, Juliette, just wait. And some people think the lowest part of the market will be around June of next year. What do you think?
I think that's right. I do. I think I think everything that's happened in this market and downturn, including the Fed raising rates, has happened very quickly. And I think I attribute a lot of that to technology and the information that everyone has, and they make decisions quickly. So we're seeing, just like, we've seen volatility in the stock market happen very, very, very fast. It's also, as a society, our real estate decisions are speeding up faster. And so you're seeing a more reactive, more nimble market, in my opinion, just because that's, technology's given people information that, they might have not have had readily available in the last downturn. 2008, 2009, everyone's like, oh, what's going to happen? Where's the bottom? We were kind of in a free fall. And now everyone, I think, has information to make, to react quickly. So I do think the bottom will happen relatively fast.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's interesting with the last downturn was lenders giving anybody, you know, a loan.
Yeah.
And in this one, it's going to be much more about can the people refinance and still afford the properties.
Right.
So in a way, it's always the lender's fault, isn't it?
Yeah. They're the one left holding the bag. But I think on residential, I mean, you know better than I would, but typical residential refinances that happened were 10 years, 15 years, 30-year mortgages. And so those are going to be protected. They can kind of weather the storm better
Yeah.
than the commercial guys who are forced to take 3, 5, or 7-year money. I think those guys and those groups are going to be the ones that really, really feel a little bit of more pain in the short term than the residential side.
What's interesting for me in residential, I also think that the rental market is very soft.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. At the high end or the low end?
I'm both.
Yeah.
I mean, look, low end is always, I think you can always,
bread and butter.
You people that can always afford it, but anything 10,000 and above is actually really quite hard to rent at the moment.
Yeah, I can see that. I think the inflows also to California have
no one wants to come here.
wants to come. Are hurting the,
Why? Because they're going to Texas, Nevada, Miami.
Yeah, and I also think too the major tech employers, the major employers are have stopped hiring, so there's less there's less of a drive, and then you have remote work.
Yeah.
So you have if Facebook decides to hire a new engineer remotely, and he's in I don't even know where, let's just say Boulder, Colorado. Historically, pre-pandemic, Facebook would hire that same engineer and say, guess what, do you want to be in our LA office or San Francisco office? And he would have to choose, and he would have to then move out to California, and he would be a renter or buyer or what have you. And so now you have a lot less of those people. And that's happening on a mass level, right? Not just one company, multiple industries.
But so, you're saying that tech is not hiring at the moment, or they're allowing remote work?
Both. They've done a hiring freeze, and then for open positions, they are allowing remote work as well.
But you're also saying that that's going to change.
They will.
What's the reason that it will change?
Productivity.
Productivity,
and and just I think, look, their stock prices are reflective of their earnings, which is a reflection of how productive the company is doing.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think you got to start from the bottom and build your way back up to gain that back. And so I think, we can look at through a couple different lenses right now and see the disparity in the market, in the companies, in the remote work, and the thing. What I'm saying is I think fast forward 6, 9, 12 months, those are my predictions of what's going to happen going forward.
So if you had a little pot of gold, what would you be, where do you think the opportunities are going to be in commercial in the next year?
That's a good question. And I have clients ask me this all this time, like, okay, where are you putting your money? What are you doing? And it's interesting. This has been a very opaque market. Like in 2008, it was very clear. It was like the foreclosure crisis.
Yeah.
Go load up, buy as much as you can. The prices are at rock bottom.
Yeah.
And everyone did, right? It lasted about 2 years. It lasted 08, 09, 2010. And then we started to see the bounce happen and increase in value start to happen. Here, we don't really know. I mean, office is going to be a sector that's going to be deeply discounted. We know that. But the big issue there is what will the tenancy demand look like in the future? And if you go back to 2008, we heard a lot of headlines of this. Will anyone own a home ever again? Right? Like, will people want to own a home ever again? Right? Like, there was headlines all over the place of homeownership rates, are gonna the lowest they've been, and all this stuff. And you look today, and we're back, right?
Yeah.
Like, and a lot more than we were. So if you're very bullish, or you have kind of a stomach for harsh investments,
Yeah.
you go into the hardest hit areas of office, downtown San Francisco, downtown LA, and you buy, and you wait and wait and wait, and you buy at deeply, deeply, deeply discounted rates. And if you did that, I think it's a bold bet, but it could pay off really, really big. I really ultimately, like right now, if I had to buy something, I would look for an office building or a creative office building. So like an old industrial building that's being used for office, and that has really good zoning, underlying land, that can be used for something else, like multifamily. So you get a discount on the buy, and then potentially an ability to convert that land to a different use, multifamily, where it's a higher price. So you're buying an orange and selling an apple.
Yeah, that's interesting. What's your feeling on West Adams at the moment? I love those low slung commercial buildings.
Oh.
I want one of those.
Got to arm wrestle with CIM. They have a lot of them.
Yeah, who tell me?
So CIM's a large national real estate. They're a REIT, and also they have separate funds, and it's a very interesting story. The principal, Shaul, was about 20 years ago, was working in conjunction with the city of LA to put a Costco on a big parcel in West Adams. And he was going through it, and he bought a big chunk of land, and long story short, I think there was a tax credit to basically have Costco move there from the state of California. The state pulled the tax credit away. He was left with a big chunk of land in West Adams, which 20 years ago was not the best neighborhood in LA. A lot of gang and different activities that drove the neighborhood values down. And so he said, well, either I sell it or I buy more. And so he just started buying as much as he could on that whole street. And so he owns, I think it's somewhere between 35 and 40 buildings between Crenshaw and Fairfax on West Adams. And he's developing them, and he's doing, kind of gentrifying the neighborhood a little bit, but building a lot of apartment units and building office buildings and activating them. And he's a pretty prolific developer. And so it's West Adams is a great neighborhood. I think in 10 years it's going to be even better.
Yeah.
We had an interesting case study where we just sold a building that it was an old meat processing building. So that our client bought about 10 years ago, 2012. So it went from industrial, and he had he used it as an office building. So he converted it all to a creative office building, really beautiful. He went through kind of a partnership breakup, and they decided to sell the building. They relocated, and they're selling the building. And we sold it to a chocolate manufacturer.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it went from meat slaughter to creative office.
Oh my God.
Back to manufacturing chocolate.
Yeah.
So full circle building, which in this market kind of tells you, you have a manufacturer willing to pay what it would cost for someone else to buy an office building. And traditionally, industrial has always been cheaper than office. And so office needs to come down and industrial is coming up because
Yeah.
it's the way the values are.
Yeah, I mean, during the pandemic, it seemed like there was less need for offices, more needs for warehouses, and that would have been industrial.
Yes.
But is there still that need for warehouses, or do you think people are going back to retail, restaurants?
Yeah, I think the supply chain issues are being sorted out. I also think too they were, there's such a backlog of, um, you know, everything from household goods to appliances to cars to logistics, and I think people had to figure out, you know, um, in real time how to handle those logistics, and I think that created uh, an explosion of demand for the industrial market, um, and I think that demand will continue because I think the evolution of our supply chains is still happening in real time. So, where we used to have stuff on rail lines, and the ports are getting reallocated where which stuff goes where, right? Um, and so I think there's going to be demand, and there's going to be some of those older industrial areas that aren't being able to be utilized, I think are going to have to be converted to other uses as well. And we have, like, I have another listing on Venice Boulevard and Overland, and it was kind of a manufacturing office building, 33,000 feet, and there's not a lot of demand for that type of product. So you're looking at more that need an infill location like that, right? So everyone wants to be in Carson or by the airport with 30-foot clear ceilings, and not Venice and Overland with 15-foot ceilings.
Mm.
So it's all getting sorted out in real time.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining
Of
me
course.
and giving me all your gems.
Yeah.
And
Anytime.
All right, well, I'm going to invite you back.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.